for the moment. So our panel of 4 is addressing the theme, Reclaiming the Commons, Adaptation and Change. Yesterday and today, we've talked about relationship with the land as being really at the heart of the conservation economy, the local economy, the sustainable economy, however you want to describe an economy that we have control of as citizens and as communities. So these 4 people are going to be telling us about some truly trail-breaking initiatives to really strengthen that relationship with the land and get the heart and soul of localized economies really pumping. So we're going to welcome here Joe Hanlon, who's from the Sahtu Renewable Resources Board, Stephanie Poole from Fusilke Dene First Nation, Date Tetso from Decho First Nation, and Larry Innes from the Indigenous Leadership Initiative with the International Boreal Conservation Campaign. He's got several other hats too, but he likes to use the long one. So I would like you all to welcome these 4 people because you are going to be inspired. And Joe, you're going to start us off.
Yes. Is this working?
Yeah.
Now? Okay, cool. So my name's Joe Hanlon. I'm the program coordinator for the Sahtu Renewable Resources Board. Our office is based in Toledo, along Mackenzie, northwest of here. And just to start off, in case anyone's listening to me on the internet, you can go to our website. It's srb.nt.ca. Really easy, and everything I'll talk about, you can find links and like full paper proposals, descriptions, results, all that stuff on the website. So feel free to go there. If you want to email us, there's contact information there too. And we also have a Facebook page, Sahtu Wildlife. If you look that up on Facebook, you should be able to find it. And we try to post stuff that our office is doing that's going on around the Sahtu. Also, if there's something relevant in the news, we'll try to get it up there as well. So there's a starting point. Now, I think this morning when Arthur gave his presentation about Himoga Land Corporation, that's one aspect of the land claim in the Sahtu. And we, in the Renewable Resources Board, work with a slightly different aspect of it. So I wanted to go over that system first, just to give an outline of the kind of work we do, the kind of partners we have. And so I guess I'll start out by, under the Sahtu Dene Métis land claim, the Renewable Resources Board, we get Chapter 13. And the one-line description of what we do is we're the primary, I'm forgetting the word here, but primary instrument of wildlife management in the Sahtu region. So we are one of the 3 co-management boards that are set up under the land claim. That would be the Renewable Resources Board, the Land and Water Board, and then the Land Use Planning Board. So those 3 boards are spread around the Sahtu in the different communities and each have a separate mandate. And the land corporations, which you heard about this morning, are set up under the Sahtu Secretariat, which is basically the rather than the co-management system, more like the governance and where all the funding flows through for the land claims. So you have land corporations in each community. And from our perspective, slightly more importantly, although not very much more importantly, are the Renewable Resources Councils. Again, there's one in each community. And so under the land claim, that's our community partner. For the Renewable Resources Board, we have the Renewable Resources Councils. So a lot of the work that I'll be talking about, actually all the work I'm going to be talking about, is between us as the regional institution and the Renewable Resource Councils as the community organizations that we try to work with as our primary partner. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about two projects that have something to do with both the traditional economy, the industrial economy, and various aspects of the mixed economy that happens when you smash those two together. And to get started, I wanted to talk about the role of the RRCs, the Renewable Resource Councils, in the community. They have this really interesting history as originally, or well, for me, the most recent history would be before the land claim, they functioned as hunters and trappers associations for the most part, and then as the land claim became a reality, those hunters and trappers associations, my understanding is, largely transitioned into the Renewable Resources Councils. So those roles for like the community priorities are still a role of the Renewable Resource Councils today. However, they gained roles under the land claim as well. So not only do they have that community priority, they also have now management priorities under the land claim. A big role they play is in all the environmental monitoring that happens in the communities as it relates to pretty much anything that's going on, from the industrial development to the more mundane kind of activities that are happening. And they also have a really important role in research. And our board, for example, does a lot of research. Any other researcher that's doing anything relating to wildlife or management in the Sahtu, the Renewable Resource Councils will have an opportunity to be involved in that as well. So they've had this really greatly expanded role, kind of different things they could be involved in. And really the examples I'm giving today are going to be ways that we're trying to engage with them on those and provide assistance and help them be as complete a participant as they can be and want to be. So the first project I'm going to talk about is our health and climate adaptation work, which really is the brainchild of Shauna Morgan, who I think is here. Shauna, are you here?
She just had to go.
Ah, she's hiding. She knew this was coming. Okay, well, T. Lim, who is here, was also involved, so he can take some credit. So we are now in our third year of funding from this, from Health Canada. And the first year, which was largely T doing the work, was based in Toledo, and we did a bunch of work with youth and elders on health and climate change and ways that climate change could affect the general concept of community health, whether it's individual health or a broader sense of community health. So, I mean, that was pretty much we weren't really sure what we were going to get into, so the main focus was getting the youth and elders together, talking, and trying to figure out what the priorities would be, what kind of concerns they'd have. And we also tried to work in as much on the land activities as we could, so we were involved in both the fall hunt in 2013 and the spring hunt in 2014 in Toledo. So we had high school students, some other youth that we'd been working with, sort of as like research kind of assistants. We had T there helping with research objectives, and we had a bunch of elders working with us in sort of skills development. So that was our first year. This past year, we focused more on trying to expand to the whole Sahtu and develop a bit of a youth network to involve youth in each community. And that was based on this experience where we always want to bring youth to meetings and workshops, but we ended up just sort of taking a random person each time. And we thought it would be way better, and all this is based on feedback we're getting from the community partners as well, that if we had some consistency and could do some more serious training, that would be really helpful. So that's kind of where we went this year. And they ended up doing, several of the communities managed to plan on-the-land trips where they went out, planned trips to family cabins, took GoPros along and recorded it, did some interviews. And then at the end of the year, in March, we had a big workshop where we got everyone together and went over all the results. So that was a pretty exciting project. And we're transitioning a little bit for the next year of work, kind of spreading around Sahtu to focus on some of the issues that the different communities have, as a priority. In Delaney, we're going to be working on food security issues this year. So again, it's going to be an on the land, largely on the land programs with youth and elders and community members. I think we have something like 3 on the land camps this year, plus a bunch of work in the community. Really focused on, you may have seen the news, there's a lot of attention being paid to the Blue Nose East caribou populations right now. So trying to address some of that from the community perspective is sort of our goal there. And so this is very much not what you would call the industrial economy. This is very focused on traditional economy and some of the issues related to that, and very youth-oriented work. So that's one of our projects. The other one is our Best of Both Worlds project, which was the last 2 years. And in this case, we're much more looking at the industrial economy aspects of oil and gas development, particularly, as it relates to our community partners, like the Renewable Resources Councils. Partly because, as a Renewable Resources Board, our expertise isn't really in oil and gas development, but we're very involved in some of the downstream effects of that development and the way the community wants to participate in it and be involved in it. So I think the main example I would use here is if somebody has a seasonal job in industry of any sort, if that's not a full-time job, and a lot of those jobs aren't full-time, year-round jobs, there's still a lot of opportunity for people to participate in plenty of other activities. Lots of those activities have a whole lot of social value, cultural value, or just are really great opportunities. And we wanted to identify all of those opportunities in the traditional economy as well as the industrial, and figure out how we could start to combine those, create opportunities for people to participate in both, or to participate in a manner of their choosing in one or the other. So the first year of this work was largely an assessment of what's going on, what the opportunities are, and then this year we focused much more on action planning, as well as basically there's a lot of really great ideas in the communities for opportunities in the economy at large, and that covers the whole breadth of the economy. And one of the challenges for us is, how do we, it's almost too broad to really meaningfully engage with, so it helps to narrow down some of the ideas we're talking about. If we're talking about tourism, for example, somebody wants to do something with dog sites, which we had some great conversations about this year. Which kind of organizations would be involved in planning that and finding funding and running the business of it, in all of those different aspects. That was sort of figuring all those ideas out was a big challenge. And then the other neat part this year, and particularly with this project, the youth side of it was we got our youth network involved, and we got a lot of really good feedback from them as far as what kind of tools they would want to see coming out of work like this. So we're trying to develop right now a set of career guides targeted at youths, teenagers to 20s for the most part, that somebody like me who is not from the Sahtu and doesn't really know the history of all the institutions in every community perfectly, something I could take and sit down with the youth and go through and say, here's, if you're interested in tourism, here's what the opportunities are in the Sahtu, here's the kind of training you would need and where you could get it, and then here's, in the case of tourism, here's actually the list of people who are tourism operators, who they might be interested in hiring, what kind of positions. So we're doing something similar for hunting and trapping, for arts and crafts, and also just for education in general, to sort of help some of the youth imagine how their future could what it could look like and how it could fit into the opportunities in the Sahtu. Yeah. So that's my spiel, I guess. I'm hoping people have some questions about this, because I could talk all day, but I'm not sure what parts you'll find interesting. So.
Thanks very much, good setup. Thank you very much. We'll be asking questions. That Best of Both Worlds project has really got lots of things to explore. Thank you. Stephanie. Stephanie, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you are. All right. Stephanie's coming to us from It's Okay. She's got wears many hats too in that community, but
Ancestors. Excellent.
Good afternoon, and I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Poole. I am from the community of Flitzelkay. I live in the community of Flitzelkay. My grandparents are Madeline Catholic, and my grandfather is the late Jonas Catholic. I guess today we're here to talk about reclaiming the commons, adaption and change. And I guess you would like me to share some of our community's work on the Thai-Denenene initiative as a way to reinvigorate culture, place, and relationships with the land while building a healthy tourism industry and a thriving local economy. So, as a member of Flitzelkay Dene First Nation, it's our responsibility to do the creator's work and to ensure that future generations yet to be born will have the same opportunities to practice their culture and traditions on the land, just as the ancestors did for us. So when you're doing this kind of work in a colonial society, sometimes you have to make innovative partnerships and sometimes compromises in order to achieve the goal or the dream that you're trying to reach for your people. So in regards to building a sustainable economy for the community of Flitzelkay, I would say that the Thai-Denenene initiative is a part of that, but is not the only thing that we are doing to make our community sustainable. One of the impacts of creating the protected area known as Thai-Denenene will be the creation of jobs and business opportunities and tourism opportunities. So this may not be, well, this is not why we are protecting Thai-Denenene, but it is one of the impacts that come along with what we are doing. And so it's important to ensure that these impacts become a benefit to the people of Flitzelkay and the Flitzelkay Dene. And a lot of the focus of our work is based around that. So we have been training our people for probably 7 years now to be watchers of the land. We call them Ni Hat Ni Dene, and that means the watchers of the land. And so we create these innovative partnerships because we don't have a lot of funding, we don't have a comprehensive claim, we don't have an agreement with Parks Canada yet. So we create these partnerships so that we can prepare our people to be the watchers of the land for when the time comes that the protected area is actually enacted. We send adults and youth out onto the land to greet visitors and to monitor activities within Thai-Denenene, and to also learn about some of the scientific aspects of ecosystem monitoring and management. But they also are out there practicing our traditions and our ways of life, and so that means that they are building and adding on to their traditional knowledge. Sometimes when we think or we speak about traditional knowledge, we often only think of elders as the people who hold the traditional knowledge, and it is true that they are our greatest resource and our teachers and our role models. But for Futsalke Dene, we began acquiring our traditional knowledge, I think, right from birth. And so our young people hold a lot of traditional knowledge as well. And I would just like to recognize that and to make you aware of that as well. So as far as numbers go, I think that there will be maybe around 17 or 18 part-time jobs, 5 full-time jobs created. And for the spin-offs, we are assuming there may be 30 seasonal jobs and 20 year-round. And so for me, it's really important to ensure that in the future it will be Futsalke Dene, the people living in Futsalke who will benefit from these opportunities. Right now in the area known as Taidenene, we already receive a large amount of visitors and tourists in our area, especially during the summer. And so I imagine that once a protected area is created with the marketing power of Parks Canada, we will see many more visitors in the land of our ancestors. And so I'm sure there will be many opportunities for our young people to hopefully benefit from that economically. I'm not sure what else I would like to say about Taidenene, but if you have any questions about the work that we're doing or other initiatives that we are working on to make our communities sustainable, you feel free to ask questions or to come up and speak to me about it. I really would like to thank Ecology North for inviting me here today and enabling me to be here and to visit with you and speak to you here today. So I would like to say Marcy Cho to them, and I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. We're going to have lots of questions after. So we'll go to Tetsuo from Fort Simpson, and are we set up, Patrick? Yeah, we are. Good.
Hello, is this on?
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's on?
Yeah, good. Thank you, guys.
Yeah? Okay, thanks. 내가 나온 뒤 세지라 다티 타조 수제 고체 시리콘 나데. I see Ruby Jumbo sitting over there. She can, I'm smiling. I'm in a language program right now, and Ruby's sister is my language mentor. So I'm starting to learn how to speak Dachodene-Jati, and it's really exciting. So I'm very thankful to be able to introduce myself and to I wanted to share with you a story that started last year. Actually, the story goes back much further than that, but this initiative that the region of Daicho is starting to commonly refer to as Daicho County is started in response to a number of things. And so I guess I'll just begin. So the Daicho region is really unique, I think, in the Northwest Territories because people of the region there have put a really strong emphasis on conservation initiatives. And even though there's no land claim in the region, a major focus of the work that they do in many of our communities has been conservation. The map behind me is the Daicho Land Use Plan. And it's a bit harder to see when it's projected on a screen, but you can see a number of green areas on the map. The dark areas are protected area strategies. And the very large dark area outlined in red on the left is the national park. The lighter green areas are the conservation areas in the region, and the hope is that once this plan is finalized, that all those areas will be under a level of protection. The reason why I'm starting my talk with you today about protected areas is because that's where this conversation about the Daicho County began. Devolution, everybody in the room should know about devolution. When devolution came about, well, actually first I just wanted to share this really interesting map with you. When the Daicho land use planning process began, they did a number of exercises, including traditional land use studies. And teams went into our communities and sat down with elders and harvesters, and they started to map out a number of different things, and one of them was traditional land use. So this is the map that gets shared with the public because the data associated with these maps are highly confidential, but you can see on the map where the concentration of traditional land use happens in the region. And if you go back and reference our land use map, you can see that if you overlay the two, there's a reason why those areas are being protected. It's because that's the traditional land use areas of our communities and of our members, and those areas are important, and many of them hold sacred sites. So when you talk to community members about why they want to protect these areas, and you hear elders talk to them, often they're moved to tears when they talk about their land. It's very moving to hear them talk about it. So protected area strategies in the Daicho are really, really close to the heart of the people there, and so they're very, very important to them. When devolution came along, there was a pause put on the protected area strategy work, and it left many of our communities very frustrated because some of them have invested 20 years of work towards these areas, and they were told they were just going to have to hold off. And I think that started in about 2012. And so a year went by, and people were getting more and more frustrated because they didn't know what was happening. Through the initiative of Tides under Steve Ellis, who's very heavily involved with the Thai-Denenene initiative, he hosted a territorial-wide workshop here in Yellowknife in the fall or the winter of 2013. And he brought in anybody who was affected by this pause, and he invited myself to go, and members of all my communities who are in the protected area strategy initiatives. And he brought people from Let's Okay and from the Ramparts initiatives. He brought everybody together, and everybody started talking about the experiences they were having and the frustrations. The other key thing that happened at that workshop is they had a guest speaker by the name of Miles Richardson. Some of you in the room may be familiar with him, but he's the former president of the Haida Nation, and played a massive role in the establishment of Haida Gwaii National Park. And his story is mind-blowingly inspirational. He talks about roadblocks and members of his community being threatened with jail time, and elders coming in on helicopters, and how they basically stood up to the logging industry and said, no, you're not going to log here, and we're just going to protect this land, and we're just going to do it. And needless to say, those of us who were at the workshop were incredibly inspired. And I remember hearing one of my elders, Margaret Ireland from Jean Marie, say, I'm ready to get my helicopter out, and I'm ready to stand up for my protected areas strategy. So we went back into the region, and we started talking at the regional level. And so because I work for the regional office, I played a role in coordinating a series of workshops for the communities to talk about the protected area strategies and where they'd like to move forward with. And so the first one we hosted was in Sambake. It's Ruby's home community. And we brought everybody in, and we basically camped out for 3 days. We brought in elders and representatives from all the PAS areas, and we basically sat around campfires and in these beautiful log cabins. And the question I was posing to the communities is, what does it mean to you? What is conservation from the Dene perspective? And I remember probably the day before going into the community, explaining on a teleconference call internally about what we were going to go in and do. And our lawyer, not Larry, he's one of our other lawyers, our other lawyer, said to me, well, what does that mean, conservation from the Dene perspective? And I couldn't actually answer him. I said, I have no idea, I'll get back to you on that. And so we went in, and we posed that question, and we sat around together for 3 days, and the most interesting conversation evolved, and one that I didn't anticipate. The major theme of our time together was the language. And it just kept coming back to the language. And the people in the workshop were explaining how the language is so central to the Dene understanding of the land that you can't actually separate the two. And so people were quite concerned and were expressing their concerns about my generation and how many people weren't speaking the language. And so that became a central theme about us managing the land from our perspective, was strengthening the language. The other flip side to the other focus of the conversation was that there are Dene laws, and there are Dene values, and there are Dene principles, and that if we're going to manage our own lands, that needs to be the central focus of anything we do moving forward. And finally, there was a huge focus on youth. Whenever you get elders together to talk about the land, they always talk about the youth. And they wanted to see youth being out on the land, being mentored by their elders in a real way. They also wanted to see elders out there mentoring their youth out there mentoring their elders. They wanted to see relationships being built between the generations. And so when we left Trout Lake, the strong theme that emerged from that workshop was that to be on the land in the Dene way will protect our land. And I remember Margaret Ireland was at the workshop, and she had said, if you take a look over our landscape today, you can fly over our whole country and you'll see it almost looks like nobody's been here. She said that's how well we've taken care of our land over the years, and it's because we were always on the land according to our Dene ways. And if we continue doing that moving forward, then the land will be well taken care of. And so that became our mantra coming out of Trout Lake, was being on the land protects the land. So from there, we decided we needed to meet again, and so I organized a workshop in Jean Marie, and the outcome of those workshops are very similar. And I remember going into that workshop wanting to tackle not the what question, but the how do we do this question, and that's a much harder question to tackle. And so we ended up reviewing a lot of what we talked about in Trout Lake, and we solidified our sort of our willingness to work together as a region on this issue. And the consensus on what it means to conserve land from the Dene perspective, and that being the language and the need to revolve around Dene laws and to involve the youth. Because I found Miles so inspirational when I went to the Tides workshop, I asked him to come in to our region and speak to our elders and our leadership directly, and he was very happy to do that. So he came in one day and he told his story to our people at the Jean Marie workshop, and again he inspired everybody, and it was very exciting. And so the other initiative that I made sure, or that I was asked to make sure, was to make sure that there were youth at that workshop. And so every year I help organize a regional youth camp where we get youth on the land with their elders, and we try and expose them to traditional knowledge and to ecology. And so we paired the initiatives, and we brought those youth into the workshop in Jean Marie at the end of their camp, and they were so eager to be involved. It was really awesome. So at the end of our time in Jean Marie, we didn't answer the question of how we're going to do it, but we did strengthen our resolve that it needed to be done. And at the end of it, people were starting to lead their discussion around things like we need to just do it, and we need to just be who we say we are. And so that became the theme coming out of Jean Marie. So we were moving into the final workshop of last year, and we held it in Fort Simpson at the end of December. And going into that workshop, that's when the phrase "Dachokeondi" started to be used more commonly. I think it was our Grand Chief who came up with the term, and he translated it to "taking care of the land." So we walked into this workshop with some goals. I worked pretty intensively with our facilitators, so that way I didn't come out with the same discussion again for a third time. I really wanted to make sure we had some solid outcomes. So we identified that we wanted to develop a framework based on these principles, and we wanted to start talking about initiating pilot programs. We also, again, wanted to learn from other communities, so we networked with the BC Coastal Stewardship Network, and we brought in some representatives from there. So there's a gentleman here, his name is Ernie Talio. He's a community-based, he works for his community as a watchman. I don't know how many of you have heard of the BC Watchmen, but they're doing pretty amazing work on the coast. And the lady there talking with our Grand Chief, her name is Jane Catasta, and she works for the regional network down in BC. So they came in and they did some presentations to our communities. We also invited in the Thai Community-Based Rangers program. We had heard about what they were doing in Litsuke, and we wanted to also hear about their story. And so Berna Catholic came in, and Steve Ellis also helped present on what their objectives are and how they're achieving them. The other thing we wanted to do in this workshop that was a bit different than our previous one was, up to that point, it had been very internal. And it was intentional that we kept that discussion internal, because we wanted to figure out for ourselves what we wanted before we started telling others. And so we had a pretty good sense coming into Fort Simpson, gathering in Fort Simpson, what people wanted, and we also knew that we needed to start sharing our story. So we decided to have 2 days together, and then on our third day we would invite in guests from government agencies and non-governmental agencies to talk about what the vision was and ways that we could find partnerships with each other. So this picture is from our third day, and you can see I was very encouraged by the response. There was lots of interest from government and from NGOs, and I see a few people in the room here who came and joined us on that third day. So many of you are probably wondering what the vision was anyways. What we came about after having 2 days together and intensive presentations and breakout sessions and many other discussions, what we came to the realization was that there exists a lot of really great community-based programs already. Many of our communities are very active in doing research and monitoring, doing their own camps, and that really what we could do is start building off what already exists, and that we need to begin by pioneering a regional network, that we need to be coordinating with each other at a regional level, and that we can adapt and expand these programs to reflect what we've been talking about at the regional level. And that if we did all that, ultimately then we'd be engaging in active management of our protected areas and as the region as a whole. So we identified some things that we thought a regional network should do. And a lot of this is based upon what we heard from people who came in to share their experience with us. So the people who came in from the Coastal Network and from Litsuke, they're doing a lot of this already. And so, you know, sharing data and traditional knowledge at the regional level so that we're informing our decision making and managing our resources wisely, and generating our own knowledge and our own research and documenting things on our own, and making sure that we're sharing this level not just regionally but outside at the territorial level as well. That the network could be involved in creating standardized training for the region and capacity building as well, and that it would play a key role in fostering an identity. The coastal network people talked a lot about how much their uniforms made such a huge impact to them as a region, and how that really strengthened their identity and gave them a lot of pride. So that was something that was focused on, and that the network would be, help promote the Dene cultural worldview and be fostering communications with people who come into our region, who are visiting the region, there's lots of research going on in the Dutch region that these goals would be communicated to those people, and that it would play a key role in finding resources and helping communities access their resources, and that any on-the-land programs that we're doing are meeting these objectives. So the idea was that each community will have their own program, and that the network will support them, and that together all the communities connect to form the network. So I find in our region our people like to operate on visuals, and so this was something that was developed to help generate an understanding for us at our internal workshop. And as you can see, all these blue circles connect together to form the network, and the different corners identify some of the major goals and objectives of what the KOND program will achieve. And that was what we came up with. Since that time, I've entered into a language program, and it's a full-time program, and I'm also working full-time, so I'm trying to balance those two, and then also trying to find time to put into helping to move the initiative forward. So I have a lot of at the last leadership meeting, I had a lot of my chiefs looking at me like, what are you doing? Let's get going here. But there's been a few key partners that we've had through the whole process. The BCI has been one, and TIDES has been another, and they recently identified to us that they have some resourcing that they're willing to invest into the program, and so we're hopeful that moving forward we're going to get some really exciting initiatives going. Also, tomorrow I'm actually taking 2 community members with me down to Haida Gwaii. So I'm hoping that that'll help inspire us, and that we'll come back kind of reinvigorated and able to kind of march forward with this initiative. So that's it. We'll see.
Let's see, thanks very much. I'm so impressed with your language skills. Holy. Great. So our last speaker is Larry Innes. Larry, as I say, has many hats, one of them being a legal hat, and one of them being a champion of our boreal forest and protected areas. So he's doing some interesting work, and he's going to share that work with us. Take it away, Larry.
Ninu Larry Innes, and Ninu Tabajamuna Mak Shunya Ashni. I told Dati that if she introduced herself in Slavia, I'd introduce myself in Inuimo. And I think it's important, just picking up on the language points that Dati had made. One of my favorite legal scholars, a woman by the name of Drusilla Cornell, says the first condition of justice is being able to speak in the language of the other. And I think that's very true as we embark on this work. But I'm going to take us into a completely different language, which is the language of economics, and talk a little bit about how the business as usual scenarios for mining development in the Northwest Territories and the needs that have been so well articulated by communities that are trying to support culture, language, stewardship, and the protection of both culture and land are, under the current paradigm, quite at odds. And there are perhaps ways of reconciling those objectives through some, perhaps not so creative, but at the end of the day, there's not much about economics that is, ways of financing these activities through direct charges on the industry that operates, often to the detriment of not just local communities, but to regional economies. So let me begin by saying, of course, things that people already know, that taking rocks out of the ground and selling them creates a lot of money and creates a lot of jobs. course, the problem is that a lot of that money and a lot of those jobs leak out of the Northwest Territories. Half the workforce, most of the shareholder revenue, a great portion, at least half, even post-Devo, of the tax base all goes south. And that's a challenge. There are also, of course, fairly vicious boom and bust cycles as mines move through either the commodity cycle and prices change, or they reach the end of their life and often leave holes in the ground that end up costing taxpayers more money. So these challenges are there, and we see that there has been, through the work of many people in this room, a heightened awareness of these challenges, both here in the Northwest Territories, where you don't have to look very far, but as well more globally. And we're starting to see now international institutions, some strange bedfellows, in fact, the International Council on Mines and Metals, which is a major industry association, the IFC, which is a group of major lending institutions, all saying, this mining stuff needs to perhaps clean up its act. And we're starting to even see that the government of the Northwest Territories is beginning to speak the language of sustainability as it promotes the further development of mineral resources within the region. So with all of that, the International Boreal Conservation Campaign, which is a coalition of funders and conservation organizations, banks, and progressive industries, and quite a schmozzle of unlikely allies, CPAWS, Duxel Limited, certainly well known within the region here, are all part of it, initiated a project to say, let's look at how mining actually works in the Northwest Territories economy. It's a relatively simple thing to do. And let's evaluate a couple of policy choices. So the first one is do nothing different. Relatively easy to model. The second one is the more interesting one, which I'll describe. So we went out and hired some really smart people who advise provincial, territorial, and federal governments on financial modeling and fiscal policy to say, you guys are the go-to folks for departments of finance across the country. Can you model the Northwest Territories economy? And they're like, oh yeah, easy. And we said, well, then we want to look at how you would impose a new tax or a new charge on one sector of that economy and see how it plays out regionally within the Northwest Territories. And they're like, yeah, we can do that too. So off we went. And we made a couple of assumptions. The first being that there would be new mines, and that these new mines would either operate under the business as usual scenario, so no real change in existing policies, or that we would actually take the government at its word and begin to do some of the things that they say they will do in their mineral development strategy. In particular, making a better regulatory regime and enhancing Aboriginal engagement and community capacity. So we thought, if we do that, well, perhaps we should direct those funds to those purposes by introducing a new charge. So we said, let's keep it extremely modest, 0.5% on revenue. So in essence, a token charge, just to see what the impacts would be. And under the business as usual scenario, mines go through their typical cycles over time. We assumed that pricing was basically just stable, keeping pace with inflation. And we also built some risks into the scenario to account for some of the costs that often get externalized by the industry itself onto taxpayers through mines that fail to complete their regulatory obligations. That never happens here, eh, Kevin? And then we compared that scenario to the 0.5% stewardship charge scenarios, in which that additional revenue was cycled to Aboriginal governments to run the types of programs that everyone else on this panel has been talking to, as well as providing enhancements within the regulatory system and significantly provisions for full cost security and reclamation bonding so that taxpayers would not be on the hook in the event that a mine was unable to complete its reclamation requirements. We assumed that if all of those things were in place, that regulatory efficiencies would, on average, result in a 2-year shorter time to permit for new developments under enhanced rules. And then we played with the numbers. Oh, these are Guardians, by the way. We played with the numbers a little bit. And out of this massive economic model, some interesting results popped out. And I'm not sure how well those show up, but so this is on an annual basis. So looking at the net effect of the business of the stewardship charge over top of the business as usual scenario, we look to see where the differences were, where there were economic increases or economic decreases, measured either as a percentage of GDP or in dollar terms. And what was interesting here was that in any given year, GDP with this enhanced charged on the industry, this 0.5% stewardship charge on the industry, GDP went up, consumer expenditures went up. Government spending, of course, went up. They're funding the programs for the rangers. But there was also, because of the net effect of enhancements on the regulatory system and earlier startups for mines rather, the mines themselves actually benefit. And the outcomes, about $30 million collected in new revenue to support rangers, Guardians programs, but some significant benefits to the territorial economy as a whole, which, if you follow the sort of the projections that we did over a 35-year period to 2050, assuming 7 new mines in that period, you'd see some fairly substantial increases in revenue in real GDP terms over that period as new mines start up, go through production, close, start up, go through production, under, and this is the key difference from the old system, a system where the companies actually pay the full price of reclamation. We then looked at some of the various sectors, and this graph is way too busy to perhaps sit down and do a short presentation on, but there are bumps in just about every other sector of the economy. Mining is a big driver, and done right, if the money actually circulates locally back within the economy, floats a lot of boats. In particular, it floats a lot of boats in the small regional communities that under the business as usual scenario do not benefit, and this is kind of the objective fact of it, do not benefit from direct employment or direct revenue from mines today. So cycling money back into Guardians programs in a community like Fort Simpson would create, in real GDP terms, about $400,000 a year, or a 0.3% bump, employ 3 additional people, and create a $900,000 per year real increase in household income in that community on an annual basis, averaged over that period. That's not nothing in a community like Fort Simpson. Or if you're looking in a community like Lutz-le-Quay, $500,000 of real GDP growth associated with 4 new positions, a 6.2% increase in employment, with about $700,000 a year of new money circulating within that local economy. Again, very significant for these small communities. So, with these sorts of modeling exercises, playing with these sorts of numbers, combined with the kinds of innovative programs that communities themselves are initiating and holding together at this point with duct tape and rabbit wire, the NWT could stand to benefit significantly from a move towards a more sustainable mining regime. And that is the thought I'd like to leave you with. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Larry. We've got questions. Larry.
I just
Then we
have
got
one
Kevin.
comment to make.
Okay.
Mining is totally unnecessary. We no longer need to do it. There's tons of scrap metal. All the metal we need is above ground, and we're always doing more with less. I mean, look at the difference between things that are happening. So why destroy our environment for something that's totally useless?
Well, I should be clear that I'm not advocating mining. What I'm advocating is that if mining is going to be done, it should be done in a way that benefits local economies, not distant shareholders.
But I was just making the point that, it should be done because we don't have to do it. And we can create jobs and employment for people in the territories through sustainable development.
I
Without
make
money.
Yeah.
no argument with that.
Yeah. Kevin's got a question, and then Christina's got a question.
Actually, I've got two questions, but
Go ahead.
One for Stephanie about Bayani Dene. What's been the impact on the negotiation of the protected area with devolution? I've heard some interesting things that GWT have said, and from the manager of the Chamber of Mines about their idea about northern tools. Now that GWT has taken control of parts of the land and resources that your traditional territories. So, what's been the impact on the negotiations of devolution, and where do things go from here?
Well, Futsoke Dene First Nation has not signed on to devolution. So we don't recognize the GNWT's presumed authority over land and resources in our territory, first of all. But the GNWT and Parks Canada are partners in the protected area of Haidinanene. I believe that all of the partners have to come to mutual agreement on what the boundary of Haidinanene will be. I think I can't speak too much in detail about the challenges of negotiations. But if you have any sort of experience with the GNWT, I'm sure you can imagine what it's like.
Oh my goodness, you are you. A great answer. One, you have another
Yes,
question.
for Larry. I've been very interested in trying to raise more revenues from the resources that flow out for many, many years. And I'm all for some sort of a resource tax or whatever. I've personally talked to probably 5 or 6 finance ministers about this over the last 20 or more years. It's an interesting economic case, and I'd be really curious to get a copy of the full study. I hope you can make that available. What is it going to take, though, to convince GNWT, now that we're masters of our own destiny, so to speak, in terms of resources, in partnership, presumably, with Aboriginal governments? That hasn't really worked out all that great, but what is it that's going to convince GNWT to actually take a bold step and actually start to capture more revenues for people here in the north?
I think that's a great question. And a 0.2 bump on average in GDP on an annual basis through increased revenue collection is an argument that even the most hard-nosed finance minister can't ignore. So, assuming that these numbers can survive a pretty serious tire kicking, we think it's a compelling case. And under other policy proposals, you can always go into, well, shouldn't we be devoting additional revenue to health or to other things? But I think if we actually look seriously at the challenge of circulating fairly concentrated sources of wealth and distributing that in communities that are adjacent to them that don't now benefit them, because mines may as well be on the moon as far as the UK is concerned. It's hard to argue that it doesn't make a compelling economic case, and the policy justifications on other grounds, I would say, are equally compelling. So it's part of getting past the assumptions that, that'll cost money and drive industry away. No, in fact, industry is under a lot of scrutiny for its sins, and rightly so. And this is a way perhaps that we can begin to put them on a path to a better way of doing business as opposed to more of the same, which hasn't worked out so well.
Oh, boy, for rational minds. Hey, thank you, Larry. We have a question from Diana and then one for Doug.
Thanks, that was a great panel. Quick question on the modeling. From an economic perspective, damaging the environment is actually good for the economy. Biggest GDP stimulus we got, I think, was Exxon Valdez spill, for example. So counting economic benefits of reclamation is sort of a false economy of crediting us for cleaning up the mess. And so it's sort of a bit of a net zero in a way to count reclamation as an economic benefit and GDP benefit. The investment in the monitoring and stuff is great jobs, but I just question the modeling in terms of inclusion of things like cleaning up a mess as a GDP plus.
Sure, and I don't disagree on philosophical grounds at all. What we did here was we went with a conventional model because we're talking to conventional finance ministers. And at the end of the day, GDP is GDP as far as they're concerned. So while we can, I think, argue about the merits of the mine, and justifiably so, the net economic benefit of a mine taken through to reclamation can be measured in dollar terms and put on a graph, which is what we did, to use as a basis for policy change. And the world that we want is not the world that we have. So if we're going to make the arguments for policy change to the GNWT cabinet, instead of amongst all of us, we have to find ways to speak their language as well.
Thank you. Doug, and then Bob Bromley.
Yeah, comment. When we found in the saw too that the biggest cost to get rid of anything, as you were talking about, the scrap metal or battery piles and tires, is transportation south. How do you get it there? But the mining industry has thousands of truckloads coming up with empty trucks going back south, and I'm certain that they're willing to negotiate with whoever has these stockpiles of material to give them some kind of a deal, or even perhaps truck them right out of the territory so they can get back into the resource stream with those what are a nuisance and a lot of times a hazard for the communities that have the stockpile. But we had good success with that in the saw too, working with the industry in that regard.
Thanks for that, Doug. Bob?
Yeah, thank you. And I think I can speak frankly because I know philosophically Larry's on board, but using conventional models when we know they're wrong is a very dangerous thing to do because we know that the full costs are not in there. What it can do is generate a lot of interest in that simplistic idea. Yeah, we can get more money. Who could say no to that? To support our Aboriginal governments and community goals that people have. At the same time, though, what's not in the model, for example, is the changing climate. Giving up your traditional goose hunt or having to hire helicopters to go, get those geese safely ashore and the hunters, and so on. So, I'm always nervous of models, and modelers are even more nervous of them, I know, because they know they almost never work out, but they're still useful because they can reveal strengths and weaknesses, and I think yours has revealed a strength there that we could pursue, but it's dangerous to only embed it within that conventional model and not to really see whether in the balance of all these other things that we know, whether it proves to hold up or not. So I appreciate the motivation and the exploration of opportunities, but I put a huge yellow flag up in terms of the caution required. I know I can speak frankly here on that. Thank you.
Good, thank you for that.
I just want to share one of my favorite quotes, and that's, all models are wrong, and only some are useful.
Well said. Well said.
When I look at this whole industry, it's not just the mining, it's also anything to do with water, anything to do think that people are going to look into this. Instead of that, people want to become richer. I don't know if when you were making this decision, it was fine. You got people from down south. How many people were from the north, seeing it, people making decisions like that? That to me is not just the government that should sit in the whole thing. It's got to be people that live on that land and protect it and the keepers of the land need to get involved so we don't see massive destroying the land. You look at Port Reagan land. That's right. I was born not far from Port Reagan. There's many of us that live around that area and that work in that area that are very, very sick with cancer. No one told my people to be protected. Nobody told them they should be using the sulfate analysis. They use my people like guinea pigs, and they destroy most of my people, especially the natives, because they're carrying the war on their shoulders. That's why they call my community the land of the lost. So imagine how much pain that my people have to go through. Nobody thinks about how important that we don't destroy Mother Earth. We keep pushing and putting so much stress on her. When you're having a mine, you gotta do explosion in the mine. How much is that affecting Mother Earth? Look at the ocean down south. Oil is seeping all over the ocean. What about the animals? Nobody thinks about all the living things. We're going to do this in the future. I don't think people should get eating on the joke. I think people should start sharing what they think all of them. Whatever, or else just stop doing all the mining and stuff. That's how we fix the Mother Earth and clean the earth up. And take all the stuff that mankind put on this earth and take it somewhere and get rid of it. But don't leave it on our lands. Don't leave it in our waters. The same thing happens in Yukon. When I was there, an elder showed me this one pond where the mine put all their pond tailings in it. The beavers don't know what's in that water. They go in that water and they live and make their huts. And he showed me those beavers. Some of them were so deformed, no hair on their skins. Elder was crying. He had shown me that. So I was mad. And I got the government and got everybody working. And I asked them to put steel bars around the whole lake and put a fence around it so deep so animals can't go in there and dig it out. So that no one could ever get hurt by it. And put a screen on top so then birds and stuff are not going in there drinking the killing water.
So I think we can take part from the young
But I
women.
just want to explain that that's part of the things I want people to know. That's part of the things we really need to work with. And I think it's really, really important. And it really breaks my heart, and I really need to see something somewhere in the world that cleaning up stuff. No more development in trouble. Thanks.
We can take heart from the keepers of the land and the movements that are going on here, and this gathering is setting us all on a course that is moving us in a different direction. David Kruko, and then T.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for your presentation. I think it's so important that we do it to the elders and also take for our land, because similar to what was just stated, I was just totally alarmed. I'm not sitting on the Trans-Boundary Water Basin, rich in it. We're looking at statistics and something that I've never thought I'd see in my life. 20 years ago, we had a meeting with David Suzuki in Vancouver. And back then, he was talking to us about climate change and how it's not going to happen until 2030. And I think one of the biggest indicators is taken in what we see, and the biggest impact of climate change is going to be water. And I was totally alarmed looking at a report a couple of weeks ago at one of our meetings, and there's high traces of arsenic showing up in the river, and heavy basic petroleum-based indicators which are showing up in the field. Right now, we're in court with the Yukon government to protect the field because the only reason they want to get into the field is because of the mineral potential that's out there. Some of the world's largest ore deposits are in there, and the Chinese are after. It's not for the people of Canada that they're trying to open this up. They're trying to open it up to the biggest companies in the world, which is the Chinese. And I think that's the thing that we have to be conscious of. And I think right now in McPherson, our focus is on our trails, the land, and getting people back out there to be our basically eyes and ears on the land. Because at the end of the day, that's what they're going to use against it. Is who's using it, how often do you get out there and exactly show us that you're actually out there. And for us, that's the big focus we have. And we got a land claim for 20 years, we have a land use plan. But regardless of the perfect world we're in, we thought that the land claim and the land use plan and everything is going to work smoothly. We spend more time in court with governments that we talk about in devolution. Personally standing up here, I never supported devolution. As far as I'm concerned, it was a sellout. The people in Northwest Territories, and Ottawa is smiling all the way to the bank. They keep 95% of our revenues, and basically we keep 5%. For me, that's a bad deal. And I think that, so from what you guys are doing to communities, and more importantly, protecting your land is so fundamental. That you're protecting something not for your generation, but 7 generations ahead. And I think that's the thing that we have to strive for here. For me, like I say, when I saw high traces of arsenic, I could yell like a giant mine, but the indicators, even from the petroleum-based items of what's going on in Fort Below, I thought for sure that it'll show up on those indicators from the north and south stuff, but it's all showing up in the field. So when we have our battle in the courts, we won our first round in court, and the next round we're probably going to go to the Supreme Court. But I think for us, now we're having to fight for our rights in the courts, and we're winning. At the end of the day, that's the way we have to move ahead. I guess we'll litigate our way to protecting our environment. Thank you. Thank you, David.
I just thought I'd briefly tease out something from what Joe was speaking to make a bit of a tie back to the theme, and also sort of link as well to some of Dati's comments. Joe was broadly speaking to a number of research projects that are going on in the Satu, and that speaks to the research economy that exists in the north, which really is an industry unto itself. And another one that is not adequately driven by northerners, does not adequately benefit monetarily and otherwise northerners, and is simply not driven sufficiently by northerners. And I think that's, Dati touched on that, and in my work with Joe and the SRB and others working in the Satu, it's challenging. I'm another one of those southern researchers coming up to do that kind of work. When we talk about localized, sustainable, regional, northern economies, research has a significant potential contribution there. But the institutions governing that kind of research and the way in which it's being done has a long way to go in terms of decolonizing methodologies and their applications to the research being done. It's enormous, the potential there and what needs to happen. So thanks to the leadership of the SRB and other organizations in the Satu, and also happening all across the north. Some of this pushback is starting to happen wherein there are clear demands that researchers coming into the north give something back and work with communities so that their work is more community-driven, community-based, etc. When we speak of jobs, localized jobs, the jobs out there available in terms of research are significant, and they are potentially more sustainable than other forms of employment. If we could get behind that as an industry, and drawing on the knowledge of what's being done in the Decho and elsewhere, and sharing those experiences and lessons.
No, that's a really good point, and I think that Joe, you'd probably like to make a point on that, and I think Stephanie might want to make a point as well, because Tlitzelke is well known for having decades and decades and decades of having control over the research agenda. So,
Yeah, I totally agree with what he's saying, and I had made a note of this, and I think I forgot to say it. So the way I was going to explain it today was that, we have a bunch of management and research objectives that relate to the job that we have to do. And then the communities, in addition to those interests, also have a whole bunch of other interests relating to the youth and elders, relating to language, traditional knowledge, all sorts of cultural activities. And so what we try to do is match those up as best we can. So if we're going to do something to do with management, we'll try to match it up to those other community priorities as best we can while still meeting the management. And what we found is that the stronger the community partner is, the easier it is to do that. So a lot of the work that we do is figuring out ways that we can help strengthen our community partners so that everything else becomes way easier and way more effective, just better.
so, yeah, thank you. Stephanie, I don't know if you wanted to.
Just speak about research and Tlitzelke.
Yeah.
These days, when we're approached by, usually it's a university student that wants to do research on something in the community, usually they propose something, and then it goes through our internal process. So usually goes to committee, and then they make recommendation to council. And if there is agreement with the proposal, then we have a very standard research agreement that we work out with the institution, we'll call them, and we sign them up to that. That's very clear on what the research will be used for, how any findings will be used, published, drafts will come back to the community and the council before they are released, those sorts of things. Just reporting back on the things that the researchers are doing, their findings, all of those things come back to us and through us, usually before they are used for whatever purpose was proposed. I would say that in Tlitzelke, we have a lot of capacity, but it might not be the kind of capacity that comes to mind when you think about sort of colonial style human resources. But we're very busy. We have a lot of pressures being put on our territory for all different kinds of uses. So what I would say is, if you were a researcher that wanted to do something in Tlitzelke, you might want to work into your budget some staff money time for someone, if it's okay, to be your liaison and work with you on your proposal. And I guess that's all I'll say about researchers for now.
Are there any other questions for this panel? Let's give them a hand for...
It's just for everyone. I'm just wondering if the presentations that everybody's been doing, like the PowerPoints, are they going to be available for...
Jeremy's going to speak to that one because we're going to be uploading this stuff, right?
It's probably, PowerPoint presentations is probably easier if I just email them than put them on the internet. Yeah, I can do that. jflat@ecologynorth.ca. Anyone who wants to receive a presentation or share a presentation, please just send them to me and I'll make them available to you that way.
Yeah, I think we'll be asking all of the presenters who had PowerPoints to be providing them so that they can be uploaded on this site. That was, I guess, my mistake. I should have made that clear at the outset. My understanding was that this site that we have is going to be the record of this gathering, as well as I've been scribbling madly and will be putting together a report highlighting the themes and main messages, but not the details. Some of the analysis, for example, that Larry offered, and I'll be looking at the PowerPoints to provide that. Yeah, good. So I guess we've moved kind of into the final piece here of our gathering, which is closing remarks. And maybe just while you're thinking of your final things that you'd like to say, I'd like to invite Christine Firth from Delaunay to give us a bit of a rundown of Delaunay's schedule for the next 6 weeks, and I think she's got an invitation for everyone in the room. Maybe Christine, if I could ask you to come to one of these mics and give us the rundown. No, that one's not going to work. Maybe that one. Yeah, or anyone. Yeah.
Anybody's fine, yeah.
Good afternoon. Is that working? Can you hear me?
Yes. Now?
In Delaunay, we're really busy. We have a lot going on in Delaunay. With our Delaunay destination, our Grey Goose Lodge, our Sancho properties, we have a lot going on. This summer, starting July 20th, we have the Dene National Assembly happening there, and they are doing elections. So with our population about 650, we're probably going to be expecting a little over 500 plus people in there just for the Dene National Assembly. Right after that, we're going to have our Satu Tuesday Waterhard Conference. We're in the works of planning that right now. Because the Great Bear Lake is so pristine, we'd like to keep it that way and protect our waters. And then after that, starting the week of August 3rd is the SSI AGM. And after that is our Parks Canada Knowledge Camp from August 7th to the 12th. Right after that is our spiritual gathering that's happening from the 13th to the 17th in August. And then our Delaunay Destination Tour group is going to be in Delaunay the last week in August. And somewhere in there, we're going to fit in our self-government celebrations. So you're all welcome to come. Go to Delaunay Destination, our website, and our Delaunay.ca. Lots of information there.
Book early.
Could I just add another quick finishing note, and that is that at 6:30 this evening, you guys may have seen on the agenda that we have a barbecue, and that's going to be going on in Sublocade Park, which is the one by City Hall. We have nice fresh fish. I've been told there's ice cream. There should be ice cream and some other things. So it'd be really nice. Please come hang out and socialize and stuff. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that. So, final comments before closing prayer, and we're really honored that Vincent London is going to lead us in closing prayer. So, final comments. Has anybody got any comments that they'd like to make at this point about this gathering? It was the first of its kind. The first in terms of the technology piece, and I think certainly the first in bringing together such an eclectic array of northern innovators, champions, advocates. So, yeah, I just there were some bumps, and but I'd just like to hear whether some final thoughts. Doug, and then Larry.
Yeah, one thing that really is needed, that we have some breakaway space where people can go to discuss these things like we're always wanting to happen. You've noticed at the breaks when everybody has so much they want to get out to other folks that there's just no time to do it. And if there was ways or an area that we would be able to do that on a future forum like this, would be great.
Yeah, thank you.